She threw his clothes into the mud and told him he was nothing. She didn't know that in exactly 24 hours, the man she called a loser would own the very ground she stood on. The rain was cold, but Sarah's heart was colder. She stood in the doorway of their luxury apartment, holding a designer handbag that cost more than her husband made in a year. Beside her stood Mark. Mark was the man she told Elias not to worry about. Mark was handsome, rich, and drove a car that roared like a beast. Elias stood on the sidewalk, shivering. In one hand, he held a tattered suitcase. In the other, he held the small, trembling hand of their 5-year-old daughter Lily. Lily was crying. She didn't understand why her mummy was screaming. She didn't understand why her toys were being tossed into garbage bags. "Get out, Elias!" Sarah shouted. Her voice echoed through the quiet street. "I am tired of carrying your dead weight. I am tired of being the only one who brings success into this house. You are a failure. You are a ghost. Go be a ghost somewhere else." Elias looked at her. His eyes weren't filled with anger. They were filled with a deep, crushing sadness. He had spent 7 years supporting Sarah when she wanted to start her fashion line. He worked 3 jobs. He stayed up late doing her taxes. He cooked every meal so she could focus on her empire. But now that her empire was real, she decided he didn't belong in it. "Sarah, please," Elias whispered. His voice cracked. "It's midnight. Lily is tired. Just let her sleep on the couch tonight. I'll leave in the morning." Mark stepped forward, a cruel smirk on his face. He put an arm around Sarah's waist. "You heard the lady, pal. The couch is taken. And so is the bed. Move along before I call security." The humiliation was a physical weight. Elias looked at the neighbors watching from their windows. He looked at the woman he had loved since college, now looking at him like he was a piece of trash stuck to her shoe. He squeezed Lily's hand. "Don't cry, princess," Elias whispered to his daughter. "Daddy's got you." He turned away from the golden lights of the apartment. He walked into the darkness of the city. He had exactly $42 in his pocket. He had no car, no home, no friends left because Sarah had slowly cut them all out of his life. They walked for miles. The city felt like a jungle. Every time a car drove past, splashing them with dirty water, Elias felt the sting of Sarah's words. Asterisk failure, loser, nothing. Asterisk he found a small, 24-hour diner at the edge of the industrial district. The lights flickered. The air smelled of old grease. He bought Lily a warm glass of milk and a single donut. It was all he could afford if he wanted to pay for a bus ticket the next day. Lily looked up at him, her eyes red from crying. "Daddy, why is Mummy mad at us? Did I do something bad?" Elias felt a knife twist in his chest. "No, Lily, you are perfect. Mummy is she's just going through a change. Everything will be okay. I promise." But Elias didn't know how he could keep that promise. He felt like a broken man. He sat in that booth, watching his daughter fall asleep against the cold plastic, wondering how his life had vanished in a single night. Then his phone vibrated. It was an old phone. The screen cracked in 3 places. He didn't recognize the number. It was a private caller. He answered it with a shaky hand. "Hello? Is this Elias Thorne?" A deep, professional voice asked. "Yes," Elias said, looking around the empty diner. "Mr. Thorne, my name is Arthur Sterling. I am the senior partner at Sterling and Associates. I am calling regarding your grandfather's estate. Silas Thorne has passed away." Elias froze. Silas Thorne? The man was a myth. A recluse who had vanished 40 years ago. Elias hadn't seen him since he was a toddler. He thought the old man was a simple wanderer. I didn't know he was still alive," Elias stammered. "He was very much alive, Mr. Thorne, and he was very, very wealthy. He spent 40 years building a private equity firm that controls most of the shipping lanes and tech. Patents in the Western Hemisphere. He had no other heirs. You are the sole beneficiary." Elias let out a dry laugh. "Look, if this is a prank, it's a bad time. I'm sitting in a diner with $40. "It is no prank, sir," the voice continued, cold and steady. "I am looking at the ledger now. The total valuation of the Thorne Empire, including liquid assets, real estate, and holdings, is $100 billion. A black car is currently tracking your GPS signal. We will be there in 10 minutes to collect you." Elias looked at his sleeping daughter. He looked at his muddy shoes. $100 billion? It sounded like a number from a dream. Suddenly, the quiet street outside the diner came alive. 3 massive jet black SUVs pulled up. They didn't look like normal cars. They looked like tanks designed by billionaires. Men in dark suits stepped out. They didn't look like thugs. They looked like elite soldiers. The door of the diner creaked open. A man in a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's entire apartment building walked in. He stopped in front of Elias and bowed. "Mr. Thorne," the man said. "The world is waiting for you." Elias stood up. He picked up Lily, who was still fast asleep. He walked past the shocked waitress and stepped into the back of the lead SUV. The leather smelled like expensive wood and success. As the car sped away, Elias looked out the tinted window. He saw the skyline of the city. He saw the distant lights of the luxury district, where Sarah was currently celebrating her new life with Mark. He took a deep breath. The sadness was still there, but something else was growing. A cold, hard fire. He looked at the lawyer sitting across from him. "Does anyone else know about this yet?" "No one, sir. It is a complete secret. For now." "Keep it that way," Elias said. "I want to see what Sarah does when she thinks I have nothing. I want to see how far she goes." The lawyer nodded. "And what about the apartment building she lives in, sir?" "The Thorne Group, actually, purchased the holding company that owns that entire block last month." Elias smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Double the rent," Elias said. "And tell the building manager to start a very loud, very annoying construction project directly above her head. Tomorrow is a new day." The sun rose over the city, but for Sarah, the morning was perfect. She woke up in Mark's arms, the sunlight hitting her engagement ring-a-ring. Mark had given her just hours after Elias left. Finally, she whispered to herself, a life without dead weight. She went to her balcony to enjoy the view, but she was met with a deafening sound. Asterisk draw. Asterisk directly above her, workers were jackhammering the concrete. Dust was falling onto her expensive outdoor furniture. She screamed in frustration. She called the building manager, but for the first time in 3 years he didn't pick up. Meanwhile, across the city, in a penthouse that sat above the clouds, Elias was waking up. He wasn't in a cramped apartment anymore. He was in a master suite that spanned 5,000 square feet. Lily was in the room next door, playing with more toys than she had seen in her entire life. She was laughing. That was the only thing that mattered to Elias. Arthur Sterling entered the room with a tablet. "Mr. Thorne, your schedule is set. Today, we finalize the transfer of the Thorne Global Bank accounts. You now have more liquid cash than most small countries." Elias looked at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. He was wearing a custom-tailored suit. He looked powerful. He looked dangerous. "Arthur," Elias said, "I want to buy something." "Anything, sir." "A jet? An island?" "No," Elias said. "I want to buy the fashion distribution company that Sarah is trying to sign a deal with." "What is it called?" "Vogtech Logistics," Arthur replied. "They are the only company capable of shipping her clothes globally. Without them, her fashion line stays in her garage." "Buy them," Elias said. "Buy them by noon. And tell them to schedule a meeting with her for this afternoon. But tell them a silent partner will be observing." Back at the apartment, Sarah was getting dressed in her best outfit. Today was the biggest day of her life. She was meeting the CEOs of Vogtech. This deal would make her a household name. "Mark, can you drive me?" she asked. Mark looked at his phone, frowning. "Actually, babe, I have a bit of a situation. My bank account. It's frozen. Some technical glitch. I have to go to the branch and scream at someone." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Fine, I'll take an Uber." But when she opened her Uber app, every ride was cancelled. When she tried to call a private car service, they told her she was on a restricted list. She ended up walking 3 blocks in her high heels to catch a yellow cab. By the time she reached the towering glass headquarters of Vogtech, she was sweating and her feet hurt. She felt small. She walked into the boardroom. The CEOs were sitting there looking nervous. But in the corner, in a chair turned toward the window, sat a man in a dark suit. His back was to her. "Ah, Sarah," the CEO said, his voice shaking. "Thank you for coming. We have encountered a change in management. We need to review your contract." Sarah sat down, trying to regain her confidence. "Change in management. My contract was already agreed upon. I'm the next big thing in fashion." The man in the corner slowly turned his chair around. Sarah's heart stopped. Her mouth fell open. It was Elias, but it wasn't the Elias she knew. His hair was slicked back. His skin looked glowing. He sat with a level of authority that made the room feel cold. Elias, she gasped. What are you doing here? Did you get a job as a janitor? Security. Get this man out of here. The CEOs didn't move. They looked at the floor. Elias didn't say a word. He simply picked up her contract, the document she had spent 3 years working on, and slowly, deliberately, ripped it in half. The sound of the paper tearing was like a gunshot in the silent room. You can't do that, Sarah screamed, lunging across the table. That's my life. Elias leaned forward. His voice was like ice. No, Sarah, that asterisk was asterisk your life. Now it's just trash. Just like you said I was. How? How do you have this power? She whispered, her face turning pale. Who did you rob? I didn't rob anyone, Elias said. I simply claimed what was always mine. You wanted a man with an empire, Sarah. You had one. You just weren't smart enough to see it. He stood up and walked toward the door. Wait, Sarah cried. Elias, honey, we can talk about this. I was stressed. I didn't mean those things. Think about Lily. Elias stopped at the door. He didn't turn around. Lily is safe. She is with her father, the man who actually loves her. By the way, check your email. Your eviction notice for the apartment was sent 10 minutes ago. It turns out the owner doesn't like tenants who scream at midnight. Elias walked out, leaving Sarah shaking in the middle of the boardroom. She turned to the CEOs. You can't let him do this. It's illegal. The CEO looked at her with pity. Sarah, he didn't just buy this company. He bought the bank that holds your mortgage. He bought the land your warehouse sits on. He owns everything you touch. Sarah ran out of the building, desperate to find Mark. She needed his help. She needed his money. She arrived at Mark's office, but the doors were locked. There was a sign on the door. Asterisk property seized by Internal Revenue Service. Asterisk. Mark was standing on the sidewalk being handcuffed by 2 police officers. Mark, Sarah shouted. What's happening? Mark looked at her, his face twisted in rage. It's your fault. They started investigating my offshore accounts the second you kicked that guy out. They said an anonymous tip gave them 20 years of evidence. Sarah fell to her knees. In less than 24 hours, she had gone from the queen of the city to a woman with nothing. But then, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered it, hoping it was Elias coming to his senses. Hello? Sarah, a woman's voice said. The voice sounded old, sharp, and dangerous. My name is Eleanor Thorne. I am Elias's aunt. And I think you and I have a common enemy. My nephew thinks he inherited a fortune, but he doesn't know the dark secret his grandfather left behind. A secret that could send him to prison for life. Sarah's eyes widened. She gripped the phone. What secret? Meet me at the old pier at midnight, the woman said, and bring a weapon. We aren't just going to take his money. We're going to destroy him. Sarah looked at the dark sky. The revenge she wanted was within reach. But was she stepping into a trap far worse than poverty? Who is Eleanor Thorne? And what is the dark secret that could destroy Elias's new empire? Does Sarah have the courage to cross a line she can never come back from? The old pier was a skeleton of rotted wood and rusted iron, stretching out into the black, churning water like a dying finger. Sarah stood at the edge, the cold wind whipping her hair across her face. She felt like a ghost. In her pocket, her hand gripped a small kitchen knife, the only weapon she had left from her former life. A pair of headlights cut through the fog. A vintage limousine, black as a funeral, rolled slowly toward her. The door opened and a woman stepped out. She was draped in furs that looked like they cost $1 million, but her face was a map of bitterness and cold calculation. This was Eleanor Thorne. You look pathetic, Eleanor said, her voice like sandpaper on silk. But pathetic people are the most desperate, and desperation is exactly what I need. Sarah didn't flinch. You said there was a secret. You said you could destroy Elias. Tell me how, or I'm leaving. Eleanor laughed, a dry, hollow sound. My brother Silas was a genius, but he was a criminal. That $100 billion isn't just shipping lanes and tech patents. Sarah, it's built on something bloodier. There is a hidden ledger, the red file. It contains proof of 40 years of international money laundering and government bribes. If that file is found, the government won't just seize the money. They will arrest anyone carrying the Thorn name. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. So, Elias is in danger. Elias is a fool, Eleanor spat. He thinks he can just walk into the throne. But according to the will, if the primary heir is legally incapacitated, within the first week of inheritance, the fortune passes to the next of kin. That's me. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes gleaming in the dark. Help me frame him. Use your daughter. Tell the police he's unstable, that he's threatening you with the illegal documents he found in the estate. Once the police raid his penthouse and find the red file, I've already planted there. Elias goes to a maximum security prison. You get a monthly allowance of $10 million for the rest of your life. Do we have a deal? Sarah looked at the dark water. $10 million a month. It was more than she ever dreamed of. She could buy back her life. She could be the queen again. What about Lily? Sarah whispered. The girl comes to me, Eleanor said coldly. She's a thorn. She needs to be raised by someone who understands power, not a failed fashion designer or a weak-willed father. Sarah hesitated. She looked at the woman who was offering her everything, but at the cost of her soul. Meanwhile, at the Thorn penthouse, Elias wasn't sleeping. He was sitting in a high-tech security room, watching 20 different screens. Arthur, Elias said, pointing to a screen showing a GPS tracker. Where is she? She's at the abandoned docks, sir. Meeting with your Aunt Eleanor. We've been monitoring Eleanor's communications for months. She's been planning a coup. Since the moment your grandfather's heart started to fail. Elias leaned back, his face shadowed. She wants the red file. Sir, if she finds it, or if she plants a fake one, the Thorn legacy is over. You could lose everything. Why didn't you just stop her at the airport? Because, Elias said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, I need to know if Sarah still has a heart. If she chooses to help Eleanor, she's choosing to destroy our daughter's father. If she does that, then I don't have to feel guilty about what I do next. Suddenly, a red light began to flash on the console. Sir, Arthur shouted. An unauthorized vehicle just entered the underground garage. It's not Eleanor. It's Mark. Elias stood up. Mark? He's supposed to be in custody. He made bail, sir. He must have had a secret account we missed. And he's armed. On the security screen, Mark was seen stepping out of a stolen car, carrying a heavy duffel bag. He looked crazed, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't know about the billions. He only knew that Elias had ruined him, and he wanted blood. Get Lily to the safe room. Now, Elias commanded. Elias grabbed a tablet and started to move toward the elevator. He didn't call the police. He couldn't. If the police came now, they might find what Eleanor had planted. He had to handle this himself. Back at the docks, Sarah made her choice. I'll do it, she said to Eleanor. Give me the evidence. I'll call the authorities and tell them. Elias is hiding the files in Lily's nursery. Eleanor smiled, reaching into her fur coat to produce a small, encrypted flash drive. Good girl. Here is the location of the safe. Go there now. The security codes are... Before Eleanor could finish, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a video call. She answered it, and her breath hitched. It was a live feed from the penthouse. She saw Mark stalking through the darkened hallways of the Thorn estate. He was holding a handgun. He was kicking doors open, screaming Elias's name. Elias, come out, you coward. I'm going to take everything from you like you took from me. Sarah watched in horror as the camera shifted to the safe room. She saw Lily curled up in a corner, clutching her teddy bear, her face pale with terror. Lily, Sarah gasped. Eleanor glanced at the phone and shrugged. A messy situation. Let the two men kill each other. It makes our job easier. If Elias dies, you don't even need to frame him. Sarah looked at Eleanor. Then she looked at the screen where her daughter was crying. She realized that Eleanor didn't care about Lily. She didn't care about the Thorn name. She was a monster who would let a child watch her father get murdered, just to get a ledger. Sarah's hand tightened around the kitchen knife in her pocket. The security codes, Eleanor, Sarah said, her voice trembling. Give them to me. Now. Why the rush, darling? Because, Sarah said, stepping forward. If that man hurts my daughter, I don't care about your billions. I will burn this entire city down with you inside it. Eleanor laughed. You're a failed dressmaker. You don't have the *clang. Sarah didn't use the knife. She swung her heavy designer handbag, the one Elias had mocked her, for and hit Eleanor across the face. With all the strength of a mother's rage, Eleanor fell back against the limousine, stunned. Sarah grabbed the flash drive from Eleanor's hand and scrambled into her taxi, the Thorne penthouse. Drive, break every light. As the taxi sped away, Sarah opened her phone and called Elias. Elias, Elias, pick up. The call connected, but it wasn't Elias who answered. Hello, Sarah, a heavy breathing voice said. It was Mark. Elias is a bit busy right now. He's bleeding on the floor of his beautiful office. And your little girl. She's locked in a room, but I found the key. Mark, don't you dare, Sarah screamed. Too late, Sarah. You wanted a winner, right? Well, today nobody wins. The line went dead. Is Elias really down? Did Sarah's change of heart come too late to save her family? And what is the secret on the flash drive that could change the fate of the $100 billion empire forever? The taxi screamed through the city streets, tires smoking as it rounded corners. Sarah sat in the back, her heart feeling like it was about to explode. She looked at the encrypted flash drive in her hand. This tiny piece of plastic was the key to $100 billion, but she would trade it all just to see Lily smile again. Faster. She screamed at the driver. I'll pay you triple. Just get me there. At the Thorne penthouse. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and expensive cologne. Elias lay on the marble floor of his study. A bullet had grazed his shoulder and blood was staining his white shirt. He wasn't dead, but the world was spinning. Mark stood over him, the handgun shaking in his grip. He looked around the room, at the gold-leafed ceilings and the original Van Gogh paintings on the walls. You had all this, Mark hissed, his voice cracking with insanity. You were a billionaire the whole time and you let me treat you like a dog. You played us, Elias. You wanted to see us crawl. Elias struggled to sit up, clutching his shoulder. I didn't know, Mark. I found out the night I was kicked out. But you didn't need money to be a monster. You did that all on your own. Shut up, Mark roared. He kicked Elias in the ribs, sending a fresh wave of agony through his body. Where is the safe? I know men like you have a disaster fund. Give me the gold. Give me the diamonds or I start shooting through that safe room door. Elias looked at the heavy, reinforced door where Lily was hiding. He knew the glass was bulletproof, but he didn't know how long the electronic locks would hold if Mark started smashing the control panel. There is no gold here, Mark, Elias whispered. It's all digital. It's all in the Thorne network. You kill me and you get nothing but a life sentence. Then I'll take the girl, Mark screamed. He turned toward the safe room, raising his gun. Just then, the private elevator chimed. The doors slid open with a hiss. Sarah burst into the room. She didn't look like the polished socialite anymore. Her dress was torn, her makeup was smeared with tears, and her eyes were wild. Mark, stop, she yelled. Mark spun around, pointing the gun at Sarah's chest. Sarah, what are you doing here? Did you come to watch the show? I have it, Mark. Sarah held up the flash drive. I have the red file. It's worth more than any gold. It's the power to blackmail the entire Thorne family. It's worth billions on the black market. Put the gun down and we can leave together. We can go to a country where nobody can find us. Elias looked at Sarah, his eyes wide with shock. Asterisk, was she still betraying him? Was this her final play? Mark's eyes greedily locked onto the drive. The red file. Is that the money laundering proof? Everything, Sarah lied, her voice steady. The bribes, the accounts, the names. It's all here. But you have to let them go. If you kill a Thorne, the hunt will never end. If we just take the file and disappear, we win. Mark hesitated. The greed in his soul was battling with his rage. He looked at the bleeding Elias. Then at the beautiful Sarah, he lowered the gun slightly. Bring it to me, Mark ordered. Slowly. Sarah walked across the room, her heels clicking on the blood-stained marble. Every step felt like a mile. She passed Elias, who was watching her with a mixture of pain and confusion. When she was inches away from Mark, she reached out the drive. Mark reached for it, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. But Sarah didn't drop the drive into his hand. She dropped to her knees and drove the kitchen knife she had been hiding into Mark's thigh. Mark screamed, a primal sound of agony. The gun went off, the bullets shattering a crystal chandelier above them. Shards of glass rained down like diamonds. Ilias, now, Sarah screamed. Despite his injury, Elias lunged forward. He tackled Mark, using his weight to pin the smaller man to the floor. They struggled for the gun, rolling across the broken glass. Sarah grabbed a heavy bronze statue from a side table and swung it with everything she had, hitting Mark square in the temple. Mark went limp. The gun slid across the floor. Silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing. Elias looked up at Sarah. He saw the knife in her hand, the blood on her dress, and the sheer terror in her eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't see a woman who wanted his money. He saw the woman he had married. The safe room, Elias gasped. Sarah ran to the door. Lily, it's Mummy. Open the door, baby. The electronic lock clicked. The door swung open, and Lily flew into Sarah's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Elias crawled over, wrapping his arms around both of them. For a moment, they weren't billionaires or socialites. They were just a family huddled on the floor of a burning world. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered into Elias's ear. I'm so sorry for everything. Elias didn't answer. He couldn't, not yet. Arthur Sterling and the security team finally burst into the room, followed by the police. They swarmed Mark, dragging him away in handcuffs. Medics rushed to Elias, beginning to treat his shoulder. Mr. Thorne, Arthur said, leaning down. We've secured the perimeter. Eleanor Thorne has been apprehended at the docks. But, sir, we have a problem. Elias looked up. What now? Arthur held up a tablet. When Sarah hit the panic button on her phone earlier, it triggered a fail-safe in the Thorne servers. Because you were incapacitated during a security breach, the system initiated the judgment protocol left by your grandfather. What does that mean? Sarah asked, clutching Lily. Arthur looked grave. It means the red file, the real one, has been sent to every major news outlet and federal agency in the world. The Thorne Empire is being dismantled as we speak. The accounts are being frozen by the government. Within an hour, the Thorne name will be the most hated name in history. Elias felt a strange sense of relief. So, the money is gone? Not all of it, Arthur said. But the power? The $100 billion empire. It's over. You'll be lucky if you aren't all arrested for the crimes of your grandfather. Sarah looked around the penthouse. The luxury, the gold, the status, it was all evaporating like mist. She looked at Elias. We have to go, she said. We have the original drive Eleanor gave me. It has the names of the people who were really asterisk behind the laundering. We can trade it for immunity. We can save ourselves. But we'll have nothing, Elias said, testing her one last time. We'll be back on the street. No cars, no designer clothes. Just us. Sarah looked at Lily, who was finally falling asleep in her arms. Then she looked at Elias. I've lived with nothing before, Sarah said. I just didn't realize that nothing was actually when I had you. They stood up to leave, but as they reached the elevator, Arthur stopped them. Sir, one more thing. Your grandfather left a final video message. It was programmed to play only if the Empire fell. You need to see this. Arthur pressed play on the wall screen. The face of Silas Thorne appeared. He looked ancient, his eyes glowing with a sinister intelligence. Elias, the old man said, his voice echoing through the empty hall. If you are seeing this, you have lost everything. You proved yourself too weak to hold the crown. But don't worry, I didn't leave you with nothing. I left you the second inheritance. It's hidden where your life first began. Go there and you will find the truth about why your father really disappeared. The screen went black. Elias froze. His father had been missing for 25 years. He had always been told it was an accident. Where my life began, Elias whispered. The old farmhouse in the valley. Elias, no, Sarah said, sensing the danger. It's a trap. Your grandfather was a madman. I have to know, Sarah, Elias said. If my father is alive. If this whole thing was a setup from the start. Suddenly the elevator doors opened, but it wasn't the police. It was a man in a grey suit Sarah had never seen. He was holding a silenced pistol. Mr. Thorne, the man said. The farmhouse is off limits. You're coming with us. Who is the man in grey? And what organization was Silas Thorne actually working for? Is Elias's father still alive? And what is the second inheritance that was worth destroying $100 billion empire for? The man in grey didn't blink. He held the silenced pistol with the steady hand of a professional. Behind him 2 more men appeared, their faces cold and robotic. The Thorne Empire was just a front, Elias, the man in grey, said. Your grandfather wasn't just a businessman. He was the banker for the Shadow Syndicate. The $100 billion wasn't his. It was theirs. And they want their ledger back. Sarah stepped in front of Lily, her heart pounding. We don't have it. The system sent the files to the news. It's over. The public files are a distraction, the man countered. The real data. Keys to the global black market are at the farmhouse. Move. Now. They were forced into a nondescript van and driven for 3 hours into the dark countryside. The city lights faded, replaced by the jagged silhouettes of trees. Finally they pulled up to a crumbling wooden house. It was the farmhouse where Elias had spent his earliest years before his father vanished and his life turned into a struggle. The men pushed them inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old paper. Find it, the man in grey commanded, pointing his gun at Elias's head. The second inheritance. Silas said it was where your life began. You have 10 minutes before I start with the woman. Elias looked around the room, his mind racing. Asterisk, where my life began. Asterisk, he looked at the old stone fireplace. He looked at the height marks carved into the wooden doorframe. Then he remembered. When he was 4 years old, his father had given him a small carved wooden box. He had told Elias, this is the seed of our family. Keep it safe, Elias. Had buried it under the floorboards of his bedroom because he thought it was a treasure map. He walked to the corner of the small bedroom. He ripped up the rotted rug and began clawing at the wood. His fingernails bled, but he didn't stop. Finally his fingers hit something hard. He pulled out a small metal canister. It wasn't gold. It wasn't a hard drive. It was a simple, old-fashioned film reel and a handwritten letter. Open it, the man in grey barked. Elias opened the letter. His eyes widened as he read the messy script of his father, David Thorne. Elias, if you are reading this, Silas has finally played his last card. He didn't build an empire. He built a cage. I didn't disappear, son. I was running. I found out the syndicate was planning to use you as a puppet once Silas died. The $100 billion is a trapper blood debt that can never be paid. The real inheritance isn't the money. It's the exit. The man in grey snatched the film reel. Is this it? The codes? No, Elias said, his voice turning cold and steady. It's better. Suddenly, the farmhouse was bathed in blinding white light. Sirens didn't wail, but the sound of rotors filled the air. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Drop the weapons. A voice boomed from a megaphone. The man in grey panicked. He turned toward the window to fire, but a red laser dot appeared on his chest. He froze. How? Sarah whispered, clutching Elias's arm. The flash drive Eleanor gave me, Elias whispered back. It wasn't just names. It was a GPS beacon. I activated it the moment we entered the house. One knew the syndicate would follow us here. I needed the FBI to see them in the act. Within seconds, the house was swarmed. The man in grey and his team were tackled and disarmed. A tall man in a tactical vest walked in. He looked at Elias with a strange, knowing expression. He pulled off his helmet, revealing graying hair and a scar across his chin. Elias gasped. The man looked exactly like the photos of his father, only 30 years older. Dad, Elias breathed. The man smiled sadly. I've been working with the feds for 2 decades to bring the syndicate down from the inside. Elias, I had to stay dead to keep you alive. Silas thought he was the master of the game. But he forgot one thing. A father will do anything to protect his child. The reunion was short. The FBI led them out of the house. The Thorne Empire was gone. The headlines were screaming about the biggest corporate collapse in history. Elias, Sarah, and Lily stood on the grass as the sun began to rise over the valley. What happens now? Sarah asked. She looked at the farmhouse, then at her husband. We have nothing left. No penthouse. No fashion line. Not even a car. Elias looked at the small metal canister he had managed to keep. He opened the bottom compartment. Inside was a single simple key to a small safety deposit box in a local bank, and a deed to the very land they were standing on. We have the land, Elias said, and we have a small account my father set up for us, not billions, but enough to start a real life, a quiet life. Sarah looked at the sunrise. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of ambition or the hunger for status. She felt the warmth of the sun and the hand of the man who had stayed strong when she was weak. I don't want an empire, Elias, she said softly. I just want to be with you. Elias looked at his daughter Lily, who was chasing a butterfly in the tall grass. He looked at Sarah. He knew the road ahead would be hard. They would be judged by the world for the Thorn name. They would have to work for every penny. But as he pulled Sarah close, Elias knew he had won. The loser husband had become a man of true power, the power to walk away from $100 billion and keep his soul. Let's go home, Elias said. As they walked toward the FBI transport, Elias's phone buzzed one last time. It was an automated alert from a hidden account. Balance, ling ling ling, ling ling ling. Status, secure. Location.